99% of the world's internet runs through 600 cables on the seabed. In 1 week in November 2023, 2 of them were cut. 99% of the digital data crossing oceans does it through cables on the seabed. The European Commission uses that figure. Other authoritative sources say 95 to 97%. The exact number depends on what you count. The point doesn't depend on the number. Between November of 2024 and January of 2025, at least 7 of those cables broke in the Baltic Sea. Authorities treated several incidents as suspected sabotage. In other cases, accident remained plausible. The problem was not the breaks themselves. It was the ambiguity. The International Cable Protection Committee estimates that 150 to 200 cable faults happen every year. Most of them accidents. Fishing trawls, dragged anchors, age, earthquakes. That baseline is exactly why state-backed sabotage works. When most cable breaks are accidents, the next break gets the benefit of the doubt. This episode is about the geography of an infrastructure that is too important to lose and too distributed to police. There are roughly 600 submarine cable systems in active service or under construction around the world. Telegeography's 2026 submarine cable map, the industry's standard reference, depicts 694 cable systems and 1,893 landing stations. The numbers shift as new cables come online and old ones are retired. The shape of the network does not. Cables run along the seafloor, between continents, terminating at specific points where the fiber meets land. Landing stations. The cables themselves are surprisingly thin, about the diameter of a garden hose for deep-water sections. Thicker in shallow water, where they're armored against trawls and anchors. Most of the world's intercontinental data routes through a relatively small number of geographic choke points. The Red Sea between Egypt and Saudi Arabia, the Strait of Malacca, the English Channel, the cable landing stations on the southern coast of England, the Atlantic coast of the United States, the western coast of Africa, and the coastlines of Singapore, Hong Kong, and Japan. When a cable lands, it has to connect to a landing station, a building with backup power, with security, with people who maintain the connection. There are about 1,000 of those buildings in the world. They are the single points of failure for the global internet. The system is built with redundancy. When one cable breaks, traffic reroutes through the surrounding cables. That redundancy is what keeps the internet working even though, in any given year, more than 100 cables break. The redundancy is also what makes it hard to notice when a cable is cut deliberately, because no one notices that anything has happened, except for the operators of the cut cable itself. Cables break for ordinary reasons most of the time. Fishing trawls drag the seafloor and snag cables. Anchors dragged by ships in storms or due to navigational error. Underwater landslides, submarine earthquakes. Plane age. Cables installed in the 1990s are now 30 years old, and the materials degrade. The International Cable Protection Committee tracks these faults. Their estimate of 150 to 200 faults per year is consistent across decades. That's roughly one cable break every 2 days, somewhere in the world. When a cable breaks, the repair process is specialized and slow. Cable repair ships are a global fleet of about 60 vessels. They travel to the break site, locate the cable with sonar, hook it with a grapple, haul the broken ends to the surface, splice them, and redeploy. The repair typically takes 1 to 3 weeks per break, depending on water depth, weather, and the distance from the nearest cable repair vessel. Cables in deep water, beyond 2,000 meters, require specialized equipment and longer operations. The world's deepest repair on record was a cable at over 6,000 meters depth, off Japan after the 2011 Fukushima earthquake. The redundancy works because most cuts happen one at a time. When two or more cables in the same region break in close succession, particularly in waters near suspected hostile activity, the pattern shifts from accident to coincidence to deliberate. The probability math is what makes a cluster of breaks alarming. A single break in the Baltic is unremarkable. 7 breaks in 2 months, in waters monitored by NATO members, with at least one Chinese-flagged ship under investigation for its anchor track. That pattern broke the noise floor of normal accident statistics. The Baltic incidents began in October of 2023. A Hong Kong-flagged cargo ship, the NewNew Polar Bear, damaged the Baltic connector gas pipeline between Finland and Estonia, along with 2 submarine telecommunications cables. The ship's anchor track was visible on the seabed. Finnish authorities recovered an anchor at the scene. The investigation took over a year. The Chinese government cooperated only partially. The incident was eventually attributed to anchor drag, but the question of whether the drag was accidental or deliberate has never been formally resolved. On November 17th and 18th of 2024, 2 more submarine cables broke. The BCS East-West Interlink, a 218-kilometer cable between Lithuania and the Swedish island of Gotland, owned by the operator Aurelian, was severed. So was the Sea Lion one, connecting Finland and Germany. Both incidents happened in close geographic and temporal proximity. Both were near the trajectory of a Chinese-flagged cargo ship called the Yiping 3. Western intelligence officials concluded that the ship's anchor had likely caused the breaks. Whether the anchor drag was accidental or directed by Russian intelligence remained an open question. In the following weeks, more cables broke. Estlink 2, an electricity interconnector between Estonia and Finland. Multiple telecommunications cables in the Gulf of Finland. By the end of January 2025, at least 7 submarine cables and 1 electricity cable in the Baltic had been damaged within roughly 2 months. The pattern triggered NATO's launch of the Baltic Sentry mission, a joint maritime patrol and surveillance operation focused specifically on protecting subsea infrastructure. The European Union followed with a coordinated action plan on cable security and a €347 million funding commitment. There is a common claim that international law has no rules for protecting submarine cables. That claim is wrong. The UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, contains specific provisions in Articles 113 through 115 that require state parties to criminalize willful or culpably negligent damage to submarine cables. Article 113 mandates penal legislation. Article 114 addresses indemnity for cable owners. Article 115 requires states to assist in enforcement against their own flagged vessels. The legal framework exists. The problem is enforcement. Enforcement of UNCLOS submarine cable provisions depends on flag state cooperation. If a Chinese-flagged ship damages a Baltic cable, only China has the legal authority to prosecute. If a ship under Hong Kong flag drags an anchor through European communications infrastructure, only Hong Kong's legal system has direct jurisdiction over the crew. International cooperation can be requested. It can also be refused. When the flag state is the same state suspected of directing the sabotage, the legal framework has no teeth. Add the evidentiary problem on top of the enforcement problem. Proving that an anchor drag was deliberate, not accidental, requires evidence of intent. That evidence usually doesn't exist in any retrievable form. Proving intent in a court would require statements from crew, communications between ship and shore, instructions from the operating company, and ultimately from the flag state. None of which are available when the flag state is the entity under suspicion. The result is a system where attribution is technically possible, criminally prosecutable in principle, and operationally untouchable in practice. Beyond the Baltic, the problem replicates. In 2024, 4 undersea cables in the Red Sea were cut during the active Houthi shipping campaign. Industry estimates that those cuts disrupted roughly 25% of Europe to Asia internet routing. In April of 2026, during the Iran war, Iranian-linked proposals raised the prospect of fees or operational control over cables near the Strait of Hormuz. Analysts warned of sabotage risk. Iran did not directly threaten to cut cables, but the threat structure was clear. The same choke points that constrain shipping also concentrate digital traffic. The strategic story is not only about cuts, it is about who builds the cables. For decades, the global submarine cable industry was dominated by a small number of Western firms. Alcatel-Lucent, now part of ASN, the Japanese company NEC, and the American company Subcom. In the last decade, a Chinese firm called HMN Technologies, formerly Huawei Marine, has emerged as a major builder of submarine cables, particularly across Asia, Africa, and parts of Europe. The Peace Cable System, Pakistan-East Africa connecting Europe, was built by HMN and runs from Pakistan along the Horn of Africa to France. Cable infrastructure is no longer a single-block industry. The seabed is bifurcating between U.S.-aligned and Chinese-aligned cables, with consequences for which traffic routes, through which infrastructure, under which jurisdictional regime. What the Baltic incidents revealed is not new. State actors with maritime access and territorial reach over flagged vessels can damage subsea infrastructure with low risk of legal consequence. The legal framework is intact. The enforcement architecture is fragmented. NATO and the EU are now investing significant resources in surveillance, patrol, and rapid repair capability. The Russian Shadow Fleet, older vessels with opaque ownership, often flagged through third countries, continues to operate in the relevant waters. The contest over the seabed has begun to look more like the contest over airspace, or over space itself, a domain being mapped, patrolled, and disputed in real time. Connectivity feels like cloud. Streaming, video calls, financial transactions, machine-to-machine communication between data centers, continents apart. All of it experienced as wireless, immediate, abstract. The cloud sits on the seabed. The seabed has roughly 600 fiber-optic cables running across it, terminating in roughly 1,000 landing stations, monitored by a fleet of about 60 repair ships, governed by a legal framework that depends on flag-state cooperation, and increasingly contested by state actors who have learned that anchor drag in international waters is a low-cost, high-deniability form of strategic disruption. Geography put the cables on the seabed because the seabed was the cheapest, most direct path between continents. The seabed has become contested infrastructure geography. Geography created the constraint, the institutions that decide what happens inside it. UNCLOS, NATO, the EU, the flag states, the cable owners, the insurance markets, are still figuring out the new rules. This is the hinterland.